So are we ready, Senator? All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. Once again, I sure appreciate everything everybody's done in this committee thus far to get, well, sorry. Leave it. Hey, give me permission to start, would you there, Commissioner?
Please.
All right, there we go. Thus far, we've made a lot of progress, had a lot of very, very good discussions. And if anybody thinks this thing has been easy, I'd sure like to know it, because I don't think it's been easy at all. But ironically, I got a story here just the other day, about a weekend ago, told of another sizable ranch in eastern Montana purchased, and they're taking all the cows off it. And that's in eastern Montana, in a small county. Just another thing, this isn't just Ross Butcher's problem in Fergus County, it's elsewhere too, and some people see it as a problem, some people don't. But the fact is, it's gonna be, in that county, it's gonna be another 400 cows off the landscape and out of the local economy. Does the person that bought that, I will defend his or her right to purchase that and do whatever the heck they want with it all day, every day. But the question is, should they be treated like an agricultural producer? We're back to that same question. I think as we go forward today, I would really like to set our expectations and hatch a plan, try not to rehash. I'm guilty as anybody, if not more guilty, of rehashing the same problem over and over again. Today, what we would like to do is my crew put together some draft legislation to look over. No one in my agency, including I, have any pride of authorship with a single word written in that stuff. This stuff is put down for discussion, for debate. Something had to be put on a sheet of paper so we can actually talk about it, right? There is no agenda here from the Department of Revenue, but to try to do this right. And right is in the eye of this committee, not me or my staffs, okay? So please speak freely about anything we want to talk about today. Nobody's going to be offended. And we need to do this right. I've just got a quick question for everybody. And just kind of a gut, and anybody please speak up. I'm not going to go around the table. Everybody's kind of talked about changing the rule to requiring an agricultural producer to prove they're an ag producer. Conceptually, does anybody have a problem with that? Is this good? I'll ask, do you think it's good for agriculture first? The agriculture business?
You get the lawyer answer?
No.
Okay.
Trust me, I'm a lawyer. I know what that is.
No,
I'm just kidding, Cindy.
it depends, it depends, because some people have a real aversion to having to tell the government what they're doing frequently. But I think that if it's not frequently, but maybe a period of every 5 years, and absolutely when the land changes hands, or generations even, if you will, because some generations are not going to do what their parents did. So if it's not frequently, and it happens every time the land changes hands, then I don't think that people are going to be too objectionable to this.
So you don't think it's bad for agriculture? Okay.
Why would it be?
Well,
Don't we want to protect what we do?
I think that's what we're trying to protect. We're trying to treat people fairly. I mean, that's my view. My job, if I walk out of here and I look over my shoulder and I say, we treated all taxpayers fairly, I did my job. That fairness is a huge thing, right? Should somebody who's not an ag be treated like an ag producer?
I think Cindy's comment about it, as long as it's, infrequent, when the status of the property changes, when ownership changes, maybe a corporate filing changes, maybe at those points to testify or attest to it. And I think that for the most part, ag producers won't particularly mind doing that, because it is actually protecting their industry. And it is a hot button issue over the last decade. So everybody knows why this is necessary. I think it's okay.
Thank you both. Bob had his hand up.
I tend to agree. I think it's all in the process, how complicated application of the
Station.
If that's the word is. You know, we all fill out a form for the federal government every year, 578, that says we're not. The income requirement for the federal program. Check the sign, check box sign.
So if I can summarize those three. Representative, oh, sorry, those, as long as we're not overburdening with government reporting, the concept here isn't bad. Is that a fair way to put that? Okay, because I don't want trying to put words in anybody's mouth. I'm just trying to make sure I've got it in my head straight. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, like I said it before, too, the producers I've spoken to seem willing to do it. I think we all know there's, you know, change is inevitable. We gotta change with it. Yeah, but I think everybody's willing to. The only thing about not doing it often, and I don't wanna have to do it often either, but obviously, some of these places, well, they'll meet the requirement 1 year and then take cattle or whatever back off. It's pretty, real simple to do. But, so there's a fine line as to how often you have to do it. Certainly, any change of ownership. But the form I looked at, that the 160 acre or less people are filling out, looks fairly simple. All right. And granted, the first year it's gonna be very difficult. And you at the Department of Revenue are gonna answer a lot of questions. In fact, I would probably call them and say, hey, this seems like a simple question, but how do I answer it? But yeah, if we can keep it simple, I'm for it, and I think most producers are.
What would the consequences be if somebody falsely attested to? That was a nonverbal response.
Like they are, if you report the business.
I don't think, you know, if you don't do it, you're right, there should be a penalty, but I never think about that.
Well, currently, and we're getting a little off track here, so I'll make it really short. Currently, I think that would be called a erroneous appraisal or an erroneous assessment, and the state can go back 10 years on you. And there's a penalty associated with that. Isn't
I
there?
think there is, but I don't know that it's ever been.
Right, but it's on the books.
Yeah.
It's whether or not it's been used or used properly is a different question.
Brendan. If I may.
Oh.
There is a 20% penalty that can get applied for misrepresenting the business equipment on the Class A personal property stuff. And that there's all kinds of carve outs that penalty can't be discharged by a county tax appeal board and a couple of other things. So there are some examples that already exist in Montana code that could be relied on for creating some, you know, stiff penalties for people claiming this if they're not actually getting it.
So I'm gonna ask everybody on the big screen up there, does anybody have they want to add to answer the question is, do you think this is good for agriculture? Because then I've got another question. Speak now or forever hold your peace. See any hands? Okay, next question. Concepts we've talked about. Is it good for the state of Montana? Is it good for the people we're here representing in general? Anybody have a concern that what we're doing here is not good policy for the people of the state of Montana that happen to pay my paycheck?
I think it's good policy, you know, I mean, I think the intent of our tax structure should be followed, and that's basically what we're saying, is we need to shore that up so that the intent of it is being followed.
The purpose at the beginning was to encourage production agriculture, not to discourage agriculture. If we do nothing, we discourage production agriculture.
Go ahead.
I would also say, early on, the department presented us some examples of white properties who had disparately different taxes applied to them. So for me, there's a question of fairness and equity also. And I agree, we're about supporting ag, but we also have to be about fairly and equitably applying statute.
So just to summarize, we all agree that the concepts we're kicking around here are not only good for agriculture, but they're good for the citizens of the state of Montana. Because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page and everybody's good. Because if somebody's not, I want to hear it. Even if nobody else wants to hear it, you got to speak up. Because this committee is actually probably going to have an impact if it does what it's trying to do. And it matters. It matters hugely for a long time. So on that note, oh, go ahead, Bonnie, I'm sorry.
So I've worked in the implementation of this whole idea for the last 12 years. And I'm an ag producer. I think it's really awesome. This is a direction we need to go. My concern is the onerous part towards the ag producers. Even though it sounds really simple, when you get down, there's been a lot of talk about it being per parcel rather than per ownership. And we talked about Schedule F. Well, Schedule F includes everything that that property owner has filed, whether it's property owner or lease. They could have a mixture of both. And so it doesn't show per parcel. And so if you start trying to bring that, showing that income or that production per parcel down, that makes it very hard. And I'm just gonna take this back to some of you might have been in the legislature when we had a big bill come through and they got rid of the reporting of the irrigation costs. And that was really supposed to be pretty simple, but when it came down to it, figuring out what the costs were for your each parcel that you had under irrigation, it became a huge project. I can't tell you how many of them I ended up having to do myself. And it ended up going to the legislature and it was gotten rid of because it was so hard to deal with. And we only did that once every cycle. At that time, it was like once every 6 years, but it was such a huge thing, and that wasn't nearly as complicated or nearly as many parcels as just the piece. So that's my concern. So I'm just throwing that. I think it's a great idea, but my concern is how do we do that per parcel?
That's a good point. Marcus had his hand up first and then I'll get Cynthia. Go ahead, Marcus.
Hey everyone, sorry I can't be there with you today. I think it's kind of hard, having only had these for a short amount of time, to say whether or not these are the answers, right? I think these are reflective of a lot of the things we've been talking about, but just considering the downstream effects of some of these things is complicated. So I don't want to hold the group up, but I'm hesitant to put my seal of approval on any of these at this moment. I don't think we've had the opportunity to do the due diligence that they deserve, because these are going to be pretty seismic shifts in the way we've been doing things for a lot of folks. I know a few of my folks, when I ground truth these with them, were like, what the heck? Like, this is not the way we do things. This is different than how we've done it. What's going on? So I think broadly, to your original question, I think broadly speaking, trying to make sure that folks are fairly taxed, great idea. But I don't know if Malt can put its seal of approval on these until I have some more time to dig into them.
Thank you, Marcus. And of course, these, when you say, I'm not sure if you're talking about concepts or these legislative drafts, remember, these drafts are just drafts for the purpose of discussion. I don't expect everybody to say, yeah, this is the word of God and we're going forward with it without beating this horse pretty hard. So Marcus, I don't know if that allays your concerns yet, but I appreciate it. Yeah, these are concepts that are here so far on paper.
Well, and I think the goal is to do just that, scratch them out, color them up, make recommended changes, and then before the revenue intern committee in June, which is the 24th, 5th, 6th, somewhere right around in there, we would have at least another Zoom meeting with all of the changes that we're recommending today, so that you could make a final approval of them before submitting them to Rick. Just kind of the process we were thinking about going with.
I'd like to ask Mr. Strange, so what are you hearing would be an alternate attack at this dilemma that we're facing?
I'm not sure who is asking me that. I mean, I'm real hesitant to create more red tape and more work for agricultural producers. I think I go back to what I keep coming back to is all of this seems like it is not going to have the intended effect on the people that you are concerned about, and it's going to drastically impact the small to medium sized producers. And so, just like, I don't know. I'm not convinced that these are the things that are going to solve the problems that you all are concerned about. But again, I also go back to, I'm representing, nonprofit land trusts, and these are good. This is going to have a bigger effect on our friends and neighbors and less so on the organizations that I represent. Obviously, I want to speak up for them and share our perspectives, but from my perspective, these are going to put more of a burden on the everyday Montanan and less on, as folks have talked about, recreational hobby farmers and ranchers.
Cindy had something she wanted to say, and then I'd like to address that real quick. Go ahead, Cindy.
Well, what Mark was talking about was one of my concerns also is, we're talking about large parcels. And those to me are gonna be easier to manage than the smaller parcels. And should the rules be the same for under 160 as they are for over 160? Perhaps. I mean, then you're treating everybody the same. Maybe there shouldn't be a 160 division.
And I think that we talked about that earlier too, taking away the non-qual basically says you're either an ag or not. Which at least had at that point had a visceral appeal to everybody. It may change as we look at this stuff. Conceptually, Marcus, I would agree with you. The amount of government paperwork I have to fill out in my private operation, there's a lot of it. And so is my tax return. That's sort of part of the deal. As an ag producer, I personally, who was in the sprayer till way after dark last night, think my property taxes as a producer should be different from someone who's not a producer. That goes to your fairness thing, right? If I have to fill out a couple of pages of forms, a couple of additional pages of forms to make sure that property is taxed fairly across the state and pursuant to the intent of the legislature, then I'm good with that. And I'll say that to anybody that disagrees. Change is coming. Change is here. Change on some of these ranches, they used to be ranches. Our economy is changing. If anybody doesn't like change, they're fighting headwind because we've all been changing. This is not the Montana of my youth, last I looked. And I have nothing to say about that other than how do we make this work better, right? That's why we're all here. And Marcus, I want to hear you say, if I want you to be able to speak freely to us and say, hey, I don't think this is going to work because. And so we can address all that stuff. We need to address where the landmines are. So if everybody is mostly on the same page here, I'm going to step away. Our expectations is to mark this stuff up today. See if there's something we can agree on that we think is worth taking to the Revenue Interim Committee. I want to make sure the Revenue Interim Committee representatives on this at this table are good too. This is the world according to Brendan, right? Anything we get done here, I would really like it to be brought through Rick, the Revenue Interim Committee, rather than an agency bill. Because frankly, whatever we do here, if this is brought as an agency bill and I'm the guy standing up pitching for it, it's on life support before I even stood up. And justifiably so, guys. If it's a Revenue Interim Committee bill, if they are comfortable with it, the thing has a much better chance of survival because it's not the Department of Revenue trying to push something. It is this group that brought it. So I want to make sure our RIC members are cool with that. Go ahead, Chair.
I have a question or a request. that if and when this does advance to the revenue interim committee, are we going to have some comparables as to what kind of revenue generation would be up or down and to which classification? Because that will be a concern in grid.
We have some of that today.
Oh, good. You already. Thank you.
But I would just, I couldn't help but smile when you said that, because one of the conversations we had at our last revenue interim committee meeting was, we have only one holdover who at this point is capable of being assigned bills. So everything our committee does is going to one representative or one senator right now. Hopefully, after the elections, we can disperse those a little bit. We're asking one person to take a heavy lift and that person is not
Good. That's
at the table presently.
It has to be saleable.
Yeah, and boy, the last thing I would want to do is waste everybody's time and then bring something that wasn't saleable. And after, this is my 29th year at the Department of Revenue. One good way to make something not saleable is having the Department of Revenue as the one bringing it. Justifiably, I don't trust us. I read us pretty close, you know? Yeah,
You sound like you've had some experience with it.
I've had to defend a few things a few times. But you know what I'm saying? I'm joking about that, but honestly, this thing has a whole lot. If what we are discussing here has legitimacy, it looks a whole lot more saleable brought through Revenue Interim Committee than an agency bill. And look who we got today, the Lieutenant Governor. You're all right. You have those too. It was just me. So on that note, I'm going to step down and we're going to take the next step here, which is talk about our potential legislative concepts. Oh, go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
All that stuff, process, you won't know the answer to whether a full bill of conversation. Because I think the way this is going to play out, in my view, is we'll put together stuff to get it to Rick. Hopefully they'll get it soon enough that they can notice it out so that the ag group can show up and talk about it in June, but I wouldn't be surprised that will happen. So what will happen, somebody's gonna have to go around and talk about this stuff at their fall meetings, which are in November, December. See if there's buy-in there. Again, if they don't buy in, then show up the opponent want to show up trying to house tax. Yeah, but so we put together that product, put it out there for people to look at, and then it's gonna get changed somewhere.
So can I ask you a quick question on that, Bob? Would you agree that probably the Revenue Interim Committee is the right place to try to get that out where it gets handled the most appropriately?
It's the right place to start, but I'm the only person that goes to revenue interview.
God bless you.
Well, I mean, it used to be before they were Zoom meetings all the time, you had a fairly deep attendance of people. So you really don't know what the interest is there, and said June is. Cindy's group probably got some policy on it, but start over to see Mike here for water research. Different groups up, we can have, we'll have interest in it, not all of them organized and represented. We have some who come in. Small plant, not qualified. But you know, till it, I mean, we're just starting now, we finally got something we can talk about that's on paper, and when that gets further down the road, then people get a little more concerned about it. So you start to think, well, you know, on paper, nobody gets too excited about.
And depending on what the revenue projections are going to look like, we might even have them on kind of budget policies. Just don't know how far flung it will be.
And our estimates, Senator, they're gonna be estimates, right? We don't know who's doing what. We got some ideas, but, so they'll be estimates, but at least we have something to work from. On that note, I'm gonna step aside and let whoever the lucky one is.
So the Bryce and Tony kind of drafted these. This language, so I don't know if Bryce or Tony want to kind of guide this show, and then Dylan has put together some numbers for. For them, I figured we'd start
Oh,
with
yeah.
the easy one, the egg definitions first.
We can start real easy with the RTC one. It's. Again,
Oh, I did not make copies, do we want? Okay.
so this is probably the simplest and most straightforward one. It's the current RTC language that excludes certain properties from having to report a sales price to us.
What is RTC?
Ability transfer certificate, is what you have to file in time you change ownership.
Dylan does that for you.
Basically, this draft is just striking the exclusion from ag and timber properties from having to report that sales price. We would need, if we, this, I mean, it's kind of tied to some of the other proposals, but if we were to eliminate the automatic qualification and create a recreational class, or even not create a recreational class, we were to value those at market value. In order for us to build statistically valid models to value those larger tract parcels, we would need to collect sales information on larger tract sales. Confidentiality. It's, so Montana's a non-disclosure state, so DOR is the only one that sees this information.
So
Unless-
the RTC is confidential.
Yeah, it's confidential.
Has that
There's
ever
a,
been challenged? To some extent, yes. There are a couple of Supreme Court cases where I've got to go to the residential property side of things for the example, but basically where the Department of Revenue uses the opposite approach to market value, a taxpayer is entitled to see what the underlying information used to develop that is. So it could be, if there's litigation, a potential for one of these things to be turned over, but it's very limited scope. And even in those cases, the taxpayer challenging and requesting information required to sign a confidentiality agreement. The stuff that is not public.
My concern is that resident, it's really an apples deal, I guess, because it's all based on market value, right? And the first is, I as the owner or someone else can find out what the market value is, so you pretty much go online and find out what the market value is, like, how it's lived, you know,
But they don't know the actual sales.
they don't, but I guess the thing I want people to think about is the disparity between market value and productive value of ag land is so great. That someone's gonna come in and say, well, I know what the productive value is, but want to know what real market value is, and use that to leverage an argument for productive value, I'm saying. So risk of doing anything with this is that what the productive values. That's it for legislation.
Yeah,
Information, it's not a constitutional guarantee.
sure. And Bob, you know, that's kind of one fun thing here. We're figuring this stuff out, right? So we can have something in here that specifically excludes an RTC from the sale of agricultural land and land used for agricultural purposes. We can tighten up the confidentiality. We can build that into a stronger statute that has a much higher hurdle, or not possible for somebody else to overcome. They can't use litigation to get this stuff. You know, there's opportunities for something like that to go in there to make sure that we're addressing the condition.
Is that would be the big concern coming from Montana Farm Bureau too. You don't want to do anything that jeopardizes the current, valuation. Based on productive.
Make sure we're on the same page. Speaking on behalf of the administration and me, I don't want that. I can't afford to lose that deal, that classification, that valuation process for real ag. You know, taking the values of what these places sell for and applying it to a cowboy kill. So we have to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Bob's point is well taken. It could be, that could be used, it could be capitals used as a step to try to do away with the productive value system. But what I would venture to say is if someone's gonna attack the productive value system, they're gonna attack it with or without that, I would think. Does this give a, is it a legitimate step? I don't know. What we want, what the committee talked about, propose this, and again, this is a draft, no pride in it, was we had to come up with a market value to apply to those properties that were not productive value properties, right? So now if I'm shooting elk instead of raising cows, now I'm at market value is our concept, meaning sales price, not productive price.
And you need the RTC to determine.
Correct. Otherwise, we don't know what.
Right.
Other than anecdotal, right?
Right.
And this place I was just talking about, 400 cow ranch sold for many, many, many multiples of what that family will ever make off of the margin off 400 cows. The number would astound you.
There is no paperwork out there showing Tim Shady paid $37 million.
That's right.
That's getting back to spaghetti again. Yeah, one's gonna stick to the wall.
Yeah. So. There is, I mean, that's really all this bill does right there. This, and it's not a bill, it's just our first attempt to put something out there to talk about.
And if you want us to beef up the confidentiality piece of it, we can surely add something into this right here that would do that, right? Tom?
Well, I mean, Bryce has got a keyboard, but yeah. I mean, yeah, no, absolutely. The RTC statutes, you can just, it's another section we can add to this to do that. And one more quick thing I just wanted to throw out is conceptually, as we look at these drafts, it's important to think of these things right now as individual silos. These ideas exist by themselves. We're gonna be talking about this. Don't let this bleed into another bill unless it's appropriate. We can start mixing these things together, but each of these proposals are kind of set out there as islands by themselves. It should be considered as islands by themselves. I think there's even some contradictory things that you'll see, so don't get too mixed up or too lost. Right now. Let's focus on each of the concepts that are presented in each of these 5 bills. And then we can talk about how to blend. So
We talked about that last meeting, trying to keep, bites the apple and segregated, so we aren't obscuring. what we're trying to do.
So the point behind, going on,
No, I
sorry.
was gonna say the point's well taken. If that's cause for concern among people at this table, you know you're gonna hear it in
Yes.
the building. So to tighten it up now, it's hard.
The question is, okay, how do we tighten that? We can put this is double super secret. In there, instead of just the normal secret. Anybody watch Animal House lately?
My total secret location, we needed to make it tighter. I just want to make sure there was some. I don't feel.
And that's good to bring up too, because we're gonna have to reassure.
I think every issue I have is dealt with in other fields where we define really well why productive value is.
Is there any state that ag land is not based on productive value? Yes, not, there's some. But then they can do an exception. So there's many states that actually apply the same market value to all crops. And then Montana, you need the first classification system.
So the statute that we could talk about, I don't know if you have it there, it's 157308. That's one here, and that's disclosure of information is restricted. I won't read the statute to you because, you know, basically, the legislature, the important thing is the legislature finds that the demands of individual privacy as related to the sales price outweigh the merits of public disclosure. There is some Supreme Court case law that says that balance gets shifted again with the residential properties, apples and oranges, I really understand that. But I think you could craft some language here that's pretty tight that it's very clear instructions that these ag RTCs cannot be disclosed. And come up with a higher standard for a very, very limited set of circumstances where that could even occur. And we're probably never gonna have a comp sales approach for ranches because they're pretty unique. And so the opportunity for something like that to come up is very rare. Plus, we're using a different value structure entirely.
But. Anyway, let's jump in on anybody. The reason we talked about this piece of the RTC was so Paula and Robin's crew know how to value a property that is now not agricultural land. So I sell my ranch to you today. If we close tomorrow, I sold you a working ranch. Then you decide you're gonna be an elk hunter instead. Now you take it out of production, but you have now we have what a ranch sold for as a working ranch. Now, granted, even though the guys or gals plan is to do something different. We need the information so we can do a sales comparison approach of some form. For my place now that Ross is an elk hunter and not a cowboy. That's the problem we've got, right? We gotta have it to go to the next step. And if we do that, making it double super secret as opposed to just secret like a residence doesn't seem quite right. If we're gonna make this double super secret, it probably ought to be double super secret for everyone, right?
This.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
It can, the potential income and all the things that come with it, and you're buying an ag property, bona fide, operating ag property for no other different reason than that you can buy a commercial property. What you choose to do with it afterwards can change, like many people buy a commercial property with all the things included. And they decide to go a different avenue, no different than some buying an ag property in a different avenue, but yet buying everything that's included in that ag property. We get the commercial information and everything that was included, and then did that what we're, so we could do the same thing with ag.
We would do a sales verification letter essentially for these types of properties, because when you sold your ranch, did you also sell the cows and all of that? Or did you just sell the land and you're taking your cows with you?
Right.
So there'd have to be, we'd have to develop a sales verification specifically for these type of properties to find out exactly why did they pay X amount of dollars? What kind of amenities does it have? What kind of, does it have hunting and fishing access as well as hay ground? We need to know those types of things.
Right, and then the modelers could then work with that and then get it back to what the value of the ground is.
Right, so you remove the expense and.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Equipment.
Right, so if somebody does buy a working cattle right. And then they sign the form certifying that they're in cattle production. And 6 months later, we sell off all the cattle. How do we capture that change in operation?
It seems like right now when we deal with at the county level with our, assessors. A lot of times we have to bring it to their attention that somebody just built a new house. Right, I mean, I assume that's gonna be part of it, not that we're looking for people out there to go and. Rat neighbors per se, but that's kind of how it works is if it's known in the community that, yeah, this guy just, bought a working ranch and within a year it's all gone. Oh,
No,
But I would say that's part of it, right? You got a 5-year cycle that everybody has to, prove up. But if in between those cycles, you know, you have your initial purchase and then there's a 5-year cycle somewhere in there, because if the assessors are alerted to, it's alerted to the fact that they've changed their operation, I would think then that would be the opportunity to reach out and say, what are you doing?
So in terms of this specific document for referencing, would it be appropriate to say something simple in the draft, like sales information is, or disclosure of sales information is effectively selling clearly.
Well, I mean, this is the Equity Transfer Act, so
Yeah,
this is, it's all Article 7.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's already built in.
And so, would you agree, Representative, that if we're gonna make it double super secret for houses that are not double, or for farms that are not double super secret for houses, does anybody see an upside to to a different standard between the two?
I think this is actually protecting specifically said they find that privacy outweighs public disclosure. That, I don't know what better higher standard you get than that.
I would agree, but what we were talking about prior, but wanting even a higher standard for ag, I think that probably doesn't fly.
That's gonna set us up for more.
Yeah, that's what my gut tells me.
So. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's just, Bob, you were just clarifying this, that this is the case, that it's gonna be restricted as far as access to information.
Super secret.
Double.
It's also, in case too hard to go and find listing prices, or signing an NDA, to find out what the purchase price is up against. There's other avenues.
Well, there's a little bit.
It might not be the final sale price, but yeah, there's ways to figure that out.
All right, so the super easy one and fast. Does everybody agree with this discussion and the need for this to be stricken from this particular piece?
I agree to the extent that it fits in with everything else. If it fits in with what we're doing, I think this does what I think conceptually, the big picture we want to do. If we change that big picture, we need to go out and revisit that with it. Just make it all the same.
But they're going to go back on the timberland. So what happens when some of these big timber guys go to sale?
I think-
Maybe markets, who's the first people to buy it? It's a nonprofit generally, and then they sell them to the state or the federal government. Back out. I think there's a couple issues when you talk about timberland use of timberland. Say timberland, doing another timber production. Our profit over before the held or. And the same happens with ranch land, right?
Right.
The nonprofit will buy it up until the state.
Yeah, sure, and I think to the extent we're talking about this, if we're just eliminating the exemption, double negatives are always fun. Basically, if you sell property, you've got to file an RTC. That's all this really says. So all it would be is another data point that the department would have that's protected by the next statute, 308, it's confidential. It just means that we have more information available to make better decisions down the road. So whatever ends up happening, it ends up going to the public domain that buys it back. Okay. Not a big deal.
And once we get that sales information, and we're trying to use these sales to build these larger acre models, those individual sales will be analyzed to determine, is this representative of the market for this type of thing, or is there special circumstances that are going on in that sale? And we don't want to include that when we're trying to value everything else because it's too unusual. And so that's the kind of situation on those that we would probably be analyzing a little harder to find out, is it representative of a true market value that we're aspiring to find?
Agricultural without including timber, because so many of our properties are a combination of the two. So you can't say just the agricultural, and you don't have to report timber, you have to go together and do it together in, together out.
Which one do you want to try
I was
next?
gonna say, is everybody good here?
Want to try egg definitions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we are having a problem hearing the far end of the table.
Would that be like me far end of the table or?
Nope, that's good.
Okay.
Bob? We're having a hard time hearing Bob.
Bob has a permanent indoor voice, not an outdoor voice.
Yeah,
Is that
but my computer's gotta go with it.
Oh,
I have a bigger audience. You're gonna leave them. Well, the next one was the ag definition. Sounded like from prior meetings, everyone was pretty good with the definition, but wanted to include some specific exclusions of things that were not. I guess start with the current definition that's in statute. Well, what is agriculture? Is everyone fine with that definition? Can we strengthen it, change it, modify it?
Is there any kind of production agriculture that you see or don't see in the definition? Like, when you think about those smaller producers of saleable commodities, that mean they're not commodities that we think of grain and cattle, but garlic and tulips or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the only. Figure out.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for asking that.
I've got a question about the timberlands, to the example of the properties that are mixed ag timber. If we're talking about a place that's taken out of agriculture and going to a market valuation, are those timberlands, would they continue to be taxed as timberland at a production value?
I mean, currently, we haven't touched class 10 property, which is the forest land definition. So based on all the drafts here, yes, if there is what currently qualifies as class 10 property, that would not change. It would just be the non-forested pieces of that would go to market.
Aren't the forested pieces some of those that have been excluded from production agriculture now? And they don't process in timber either, right? Like in the big smellies, they're not taking timber out of there, are they?
So I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
If you looked at the flow of making a decision as to where what land is classified as, the first question is that land does it meet the classifications for forest land? It is not the other direction. Usually we think of that as last, but it's actually first. Because in statute, there's nothing about filing for an application to get forest land. It's just if the land meets these requirements, it is forest land. The other thing is forest and timberland only gets a harvest once every 50 to 80 years. So we can't really say what the intent of that property owner in 50 to 80 years is going to be. So if it produces enough timber and meets all, there's like 7 different requirements that are all interrelated. If it meets all of those, it gets forest land classification.
Okay, thank you.
So a place sells, you get the RTC. How is the department gonna separate apart the,
Timber value.
Right. That's a very good
I
question.
mean, I guess we would,
Currently,
in our sales verification process, we would just be determining that that entire property sell at market value. And then that's what we'd be using to build our models, is saying, hey, this was a 10,000 acre parcel. We don't really care if 6,000 of it was ag and 4,000 was timber. We're just determining was the price that's reported to us, is that market value for that 10,000 acres? And then we're gonna use that to say, okay, in our large acre model, you know, 1 acre is going for $50 an acre, and that's what we're gonna use to build the models. We don't, from that perspective, we're just determining that 10,000 acres and that price was at market value. If we determine, yes, we don't care what the mix of that property is they use, we're just building a model that says, okay, we have these 10 large acre tract sales, and they tell us that large acre tracts in this area sell for $50 an acre at market value. And that's what we would use to build our model to apply to these properties. So we aren't so much concerned with the makeup of that. We're concerned, this is the size with the price paid market value, or was it, was that, were they buying production timber in the future? And it's not reflective of what that would sell for different use at market value. So everyone thinks the actual definition of agricultural is fine, and we can move on to the exclusions. So again, these are just kind of some of the things we tried to capture from prior conversations and some of the examples that came up in previous meetings, but again.
and if we're not causing a little bit of heartburn, we didn't do our job.
What about those properties who are bona fide production agriculture, but they have a corn maze? Are you gonna segregate the corn maze? I mean, what do you do with that?
I think
Temporary, yeah.
occasional
But
use is the term.
they're using it, that they've got their 10 acre parcel of land that they just put up a corn maze every fall. That's all they do with it. They don't actually do anything other than that. It's recreation, it's trying to get people to go to the land to just walk around corn mazes. They're
Right.
not trying to get at that underlying purpose of production ag.
Okay.
And we were very careful with how we drafted these as well. These exclusions, you'll notice that each of the big capital letters use the word presumption in there. The idea being that if actual use is ag, this is a rebuttable presumption that a taxpayer or a landowner could demonstrate to the department. So it's not like a hard and fast.
Okay. That makes sense.
Correct with.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
So you could raise livestock and have pigs.
I mean, that's, I assume that's why you raise livestock.
Well, so like I have a client that does primarily agricultural, but they also have an arena that they use commercially, and that acreage and arena is taxed commercially, whereas the rest is agricultural. So there may be, if the petting zoo is a discrete, yeah, that may be carved out as a commercial use, but the rest of it is agricultural.
You're right. There's some folks in Cascade County who have a parcel that's right on the Sun River, but its intention is agriculture, but at the front, where there's a highway, there's a destination building, and it is taxed commercially too.
I think it's important to remember, this is somewhat related to the income component too, of showing that you meet the income requirements and saying that you can have your ag operation and show that the income from that meets the threshold and exclude the, you know, the arena or the, you know, the ecotourism or whatever from that.
That's a good segue. We actually have the.
There's a typo I want to point
Oh, yeah.
out before you scroll down,
Let's go.
scroll back up. You left out a verb.
Oh,
Scroll up to 3, small 3. These excluded activities include but are not limited to.
or not. Yeah.
And I don't know how to do this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. What I do not want to do is to leave. It's gonna sound bad, but I do not want to leave the Department of Revenue a whole bunch of discretion in legislative intent here. It's not always gonna be always that yours truly is the director of the Department of Revenue and might know a little bit about farming. And there will be future administrations that have different agendas. And that goes back to when I jokingly said, I don't trust me. I watched past directors do things that I didn't think were very trustworthy. I hope I'm not one of those. But we need to build this thing where there's not a lot of room for future administrations of any stripes to screw around in this, frankly. I just, that scares me worse than anything is leaving administrations with a bunch of discretion to muck around.
Thank you for bringing that up because I'm sitting here thinking, all right, now let's get to the rules process. Yeah,
I don't want to have
Thank
many
you.
rules, right?
thank you.
And we've seen at past administrations change massive policy through rules. And I had to defend a lot of that stuff, got my butt kicked a few times doing it, but I want to make sure we're not creating a door for somebody we don't see coming. And I don't care what stripes they wear. And I worry about presumed, that word scares me, frankly. As a lawyer, it scares me, and as a director, it scares me worse. We had to do something like that, but I just want everybody to know, I do not want pages and pages of rules on this stuff. If the legislature passes it, we want this to be as watertight as possible. That was my joke about not trusting me.
So I have a word I would like to see in this, just from having been on the administration side of that. It says hobby farms and gardens. Is that hobby gardens? Or is it all gardens? It's hobby farms and all gardens. I would like it to say personal gardens. Or something of that sort, so that it specifies
I think
what
that's good.
types of gardens. Yes.
Just change gardens and hobby farms.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of properties that are truck gardens,
Well,
et cetera, that are
litter outs.
agricultural.
Right.
And so that's why I would like that added in, something to that effect.
Good catch.
I agree.
Well, but I think the second sentence, what is that? Well, it says this is presumed to be personal enjoyment and consumption, not.
I read it as just all gardens, honestly. I didn't read it as hobby gardens.
Yes, that's when I read it as all gardens too, and I went, oh, this is getting us out of a lot of. work.
Right? I have a question about the equestrian activities. It just says for keeping for personal pleasure riding and competition is not typically considered. Ag use is kind of leaving out that whole renting your horses to the
Stables.
therapist or renting your horses out.
The
It's just
stables,
leaving it as,
that's commercial.
that's commercial, but it reads as only these two things are considered hobby horses.
Or
Yep, good catch too, Amanda.
Only because it's.
Yeah.
And maybe just, using horses for personal pleasure and competition, or keeping.
other than primary purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the primary purpose isn't for breeding, selling, or an integral part of your ag operation, it should be excluded.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think there's another paragraph down here where commercial purposes.
Okay. Okay,
And that might help if we can just jump down to that, maybe then we can look at that, figure out how it would then work with the rest of the language here. Because again, when we read statutes, when we
Yeah.
create these things. Down the road, what Brennan was getting at, when you read these things, you have to take everything in the statute.
Well, could we add therapy, keeping horses for personal pleasure, pleasure riding, competition? Or therapy, or,
Actually, commercial playing fields.
well, yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
So I guess let's see, let's see what,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, so, and to be clear, these are, A and B are kind of presented as alternates, they're not intended to be read together. It just seemed like an easy way to write them both that way.
I actually liked it flipping them. When I read it, I thought you were saying you wanted to flip B is in place of A and move the other down, because to me, it's a summary and then it goes into a little bit more detail. That was the way I read it.
Oh, yeah, and again, this is drafting, as Brandon said, there's no pride in authorship here, just tear it apart. Point out all the plot holes and spelling errors, that's why we're here.
That's why
It's
we're
something
here.
very good.
And this won't be the end all, because by the time this goes through Rick, and then if it gets introduced to the legislature, it will go through multiple hearings there in different chambers, so.
I'm sure Jared and I will be talking a lot about it.
What about the 40-acre parcel that keeps horses for personal pleasure, but it also raises hay as much as it can under the pit on 40 acres?
The hay would have to be the qualifier, not the
Not
horses.
the horses.
It'd still be generating ag.
As long as the hay can produce
As long as it meets,
$1,500 worth of income, then it would qualify.
We gonna reconsider that threshold also?
We got it.
Okay. I just got all these copies this morning because I don't know what happened to the email, so I'm like coming in a little late.
So, yeah, I mean, Bonnie, to your point, if B and A, they could both be in there. The reason why I had sort of thought of them as alternates is because B was sort of like a summary.
On C, I think it needs to be or, either pleasure riding or competition. It, and
Oh,
makes
or, yeah.
both elements required.
Well, why don't you put
Yeah,
and
that's why I was
slash or?
thinking.
No,
That is
because that
true.
means or.
Yeah.
I mean, if either one of them is present,
Oh, okay, I'm with you.
you don't qualify. Either
that-
riding or,
That's how I had written that originally, it's one or the other,
Yeah.
not one and the other.
right.
Right.
You're fine.
But you could also, keeping horses for personal pleasure,
Or.
riding, competition, or insert other thing here.
Mine says or.
It could be, I tried to make it, at the very top, but are not limited to. So it's just providing some examples, but it's not an exhaustive list of everything that's in this.
So do we want may be considered agricultural? I mean, there's that may word. Shall be, may.
Well, that's, if the primary purpose is breeding or training horses. So
That
we
you're
kinda talked
selling.
about- Yeah, for sale, basically, it gets to that commercial intent. You're raising horses for sale. Then I mean, if somebody wants to tell me that's not ag,
It is a.
yeah,
There's a lot of people
Different
that-
than selling your
yeah, and
house.
that's why equestrian is always kind of that weird one. I know Brandon probably had a couple of hobby farm cases. I've had a couple of hobby farm cases. Where it's, they've got a couple of horses, they're trying to deduct everything.
You mean for income tax
For income
purposes?
tax.
Yeah, so that's a totally.
It is totally different, but
But same argument.
same argument, same similar style to get the lane classified.
And some of those are hysterical, with it deducting the lawnmower.
Sure. I thought that's what a horse was.
Only in Ponderosa.
There you go.
Do you think there is some places where you can scratch out some maybes and some presumes?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Remember, like, no pride in authorship, that's what we're here, let's write
You
it.
don't need that maybe. Consider that agricultural. It is.
I like that in there only because you don't wanna say, for sure you will get ag. You may get ag if you meet all the requirements, right?
So I'm gonna jump back a little bit on this, and this is in 15.1.101, not 15.7. And so this is not just property taxes here, this definition of agriculture. So when you get into that other part, that would go into the property tax section.
Yeah, Bonnie brings up a good point. This is
That's what-
applying to every tax thing, including your income taxes. This definition, right? It isn't just limited to property tax. That's good.
Right.
Good information to have.
So that's like some of these things that are ag products aren't necessarily things that we're gonna qualify the income because it's not grown from out of the soil itself. But yet it is agriculture. So just, that's a state, something to think about.
So on the equestrian piece though, do you think that we have it covered enough for those people that are training their horses, but they're not selling them? They may be leasing them, or they may be using them commercially for a therapy or something like that. Do we think that's all addressed?
It says if the primary purpose is breeding or training,
For sale?
oh, breeding, okay. Sometimes, yeah, you don't own them, in other words, you're just training them.
That'd be commercial, right? If you were,
That would be.
right. But if I'm raising colts and riding them and selling them down the road, that would be
Hey,
ag.
So if you're renting your pasture out to an outfitter that's got 40 head of horses out there that use the outfitting business, that he uses in his outfitting business, how is that?
That's grazing.
Yeah.
That's grazing.
You're
so,
selling the grass.
You're selling the grass. Doesn't matter if it's what the horse does.
So if I own, if I'm I'm primarily an outfitter and I own.
the horses that you're
Yeah,
then using,
Have my horses on there, but I'm using them in an outfit business, how does that land become non-ag?
that's my question. I don't know that we've addressed those scenarios in
Wait,
here. You're raising the horses to use them for a commercial operation other than egg production.
Probably not even raising them, you just bought them, you use them for
Yeah.
back animals.
Right.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, but the land you use to produce feed for them should be agricultural. I mean, your grazing land.
Because your commercial operation is being taxed already
Well, it's,
in a different way.
but that's what this thing does, it says if you're a commercial operation, you're not ag, right? There's a whole bunch of things in there that are commercial and.
But that's where they go,
Outfitting is a commercial operation.
just like my client that generally has grazing land and actually they lease a lot of it to other horse owners. They treat that as agricultural, but the one area that's actually the arena is commercial. They can do that for the outfitter too, that those aspects of the business that the land is used for the commercial activity versus grazing, I think they can segregate.
But the next question is, what if the outfitter owns them? He's not raising horses for sale, he's not training horses for sale, he's got 160 acres that he's grazing.
And that's all you've
There's
got.
no
is
layer of
horses.
separation
Yeah.
between,
Yeah.
I'm growing hay so that you can put your horses on it. There's no.
Right. Oh, Amanda's got an answer for this,
You
maybe.
can correct me if I'm wrong, but first it would have to meet the AUM requirement
Yeah,
for grazing.
Right.
Second of all, we then look at land use. Just because you meet the AUM requirement, if you are not using it in an agricultural manner, it would not qualify.
But it's feeding horses an agriculture manner. It's not considered.
Not if the livestock is not in agricultural livestock.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I want to get back to what Bonnie said earlier. We're in 15.1.1 definition of agriculture, and if we look, I'll point at it, to make it easier. What we're talking about, this commercial purposes, is this word, or this phrase, this term, in this definition, we're trying to say, for purposes of what agriculture is, and that's already, we talked about at the beginning, we're all okay with that, it's the production of food, feed, fiber, commodities, livestock, and poultry, bees, biological, produced for commercial purposes, right? So we're kind of in this, want to make sure we're keeping our frame of reference correct, that we're talking about this commercial purposes within this definition of what is agriculture.
So,
And I think it helps answer some of the questions that were raised.
well, yeah, I mean, the outfitter is a commercial operation utilizing livestock.
Mhm.
So does that fit that definition? Because my next question would be, what do you do with somebody that raises hay, sells it to, or equestrians that aren't in the production of? I mean, obviously, we're assuming if you're raising hay and selling it, that's ag, but the
Yeah.
product's not being used for.
Once we
It might
sell
be
we
a
don't care.
personal horse that's using, but still the raising of the hay for sale is agricultural. It doesn't matter whether it's used by a.
Right, and I
Or
agree,
some
I think
goat,
that could be the appropriate
Mhm.
point, but.
The way it is, that's how I would.
But the question comes back to, so if I'm an outfitter
Right,
and I've got 160 and I'm grazing my string on it. I don't sell them. I pack hunters in the fall. Am I a commercial operation or am I in ag? Is that 160? And that's Robin's question.
That's
right?
my question.
That's Robin's question. What do you, how do you treat that out there? He's raising horses that he's using.
It's personal consumption,
Well, it'd be-
because it's for your personal commercial operation.
that's how that would read, I think. Is that our intent? Go ahead, Vaughn.
But that would be in 15.7.202
Mhm.
rather than here. This is just a definition of what commodities are agricultural.
Okay.
Then when we talk about which of those qualify property for ag classification is a different statute.
Yep.
So that's a different portion.
you.
So this one right now, we're just dealing with what commodities are agricultural. And so
So we can deal with that in the
we'll
real.
deal with
in the-
that when we get to one of these others later on here.
Okay.
Have we beat that horse hard enough?
I want
No
to point
pun
out,
intended.
So you had 40 horses.
I want to point out just some clunky language that is a bit contradictory, because in little 3, you're talking about activities related to agriculture that are generally not considered agriculture. And then you go down to D and it's talking about activities unrelated to agriculture. So you're defining things that are related to agriculture. And then you're using unrelated to agriculture to define that. And I think conceptually it works, but the language contradicts
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. That certainly does, I mean,
Yeah. Can we,
It would be easy enough to clean up, and I was kind of just getting at the. Well, if you got the little restaurant on the farm, that's a commercial operation, and just wanted to make sure that was carved out of the definition of agriculture.
Spruce that up a little, will you, Tony?
like I said, right?
why don't we just make a note of that and see if we can address that? I think,
It's a good point. It is clunky,
yeah,
triple negative.
yeah.
I was going for a record quadruple, but.
Underachieved again.
Rotation.
But we're gonna
Think
stick
we
to
need
the
to
landing.
Add anything additional here or?
Cover all of our scenarios that we talked about, I think. Other than what we're gonna talk about more in 15.7.202.
I would just say that, you know, the primary intent is generating income and profit is important. You can generate income and never intend to make a profit. And you may never make a profit even though you intend to.
And we gotta be, just in my experience as counsel for the department, you know, profit is a word that has more than one meaning. And you gotta be a little careful about that with ag. Because there were quite a number of cases that I got as counsel, especially were income tax cases, but hey, wait a minute, this farm didn't show a profit for 15 years. It must be a toy. And I'm like, well, no, wait a minute. They didn't show taxable much or any taxable income for X number of years. But taxable income isn't necessarily profit, right? If you're depreciating a whole bunch of depreciable assets against an otherwise quote profitable operation, you may show zero income on your.
You have a good account.
That's right.
Figure out how to reduce your income.
That's why I pay them. Problem is you get a Department of Revenue auditor or an IRS auditor that looks at that and they think profit means taxable income. So I want to be a little careful because a lot of these ag operations and commercial operations don't show taxable income, but they're paying the bills. That's just something about why I gotta be a little careful about these. They generate income, but now how do we, I'm not sure we want to be in the business of defining profit in this group.
That's why I need to stick to gross.
Yeah.
When you're talking about netting.
Yeah, there's a lot of definitions in that, right? And how, once again, I don't want the Department of Revenue making that decision. Well, I'm on the job or somebody else. Is that me?
It's for birds.
I thought it was more voices in my head again.
So then are you saying you want profit out of there?
Well, Bob, what do you think? I mean, don't you see trouble with that?
I do, but I see trouble without it too. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, isn't it intending to make profit, which it's not saying you have to make a profit, but that's your
Yeah.
intention.
Profit used here is a general sense. It's not a technical term defining what profit is. It's a intention to,
How about intending
I-
to produce income rather than using the word profit?
I think profit, well, I think profit is appropriately used here.
Do you? Okay.
I mean, that makes my 35 cups of coffee at 8 o'clock at night brain when I was writing, it's pretty good.
That your former professor thought you defined something
Yeah.
else? You know, I'm just dredging up past experience where we've run into these things and it's, again, somebody got a lot of heartburn.
Yeah, and it's a very weird amorphous thing to try and define and put words to, and conceptually, it's. I mean, yeah,
It is when we see it.
you know,
Right.
the old, what is the old Supreme Court case on pornography, it's really hard to define, but you know when you see it.
I mean, most agricultural people do, and true agricultural producers do intend to make a profit.
Yeah.
They may fail, but they truly do intend to make enough money to pay the bills.
I think it's hard to keep tractors fuel, you know. Just pay the bill, right?
Yeah, they expect you to pay.
Are we ready for the next one?
Yeah, if it's something that we can also, I mean, this isn't like we have to get all the drafting done here, maybe this is something we can. Have some drafts that are circulated online or via email, or maybe we can have this as kind of that, Robin mentioned, trying to get together before the revenue interim committee meeting in June. You know, maybe that's when we can bring some more ideas to the table.
So where's that term profit used?
I don't see it.
Yeah,
Down below.
Oh, it's
Under
not
commercial.
commercial purposes, sorry.
let's see,
Oh.
yeah.
It's.
Oh, yes, down very last
the-
one. And then the.
To generate revenue and profit, okay, so,
But profiting through the sale of agricultural products is not the same as making a profit. In this form, it's a verb
right, I know, yeah, profit, yeah, you're right.
as opposed to a noun. So
Well,
it's
to
like a-
generate, well, actually, no, to generate revenue and profit, that is.
And
in
profit through the sale.
Oh, I'm reading it as a noun, you're reading it as a verb, and it could be read either way.
Yeah.
As structured, so I think we should, so maybe, to generate revenue, can we just, maybe we should delete profit there, to generate revenue.
They're looking at B, right?
Yeah.
Under B. And again, this is kind of why I presented A and B as alternates of each other as opposed to being read together. Because I wasn't really sure, this is it's a big thing to try and figure out how do you define what a commercial purpose is.
Yeah. Okay, well, I take that, I think taking profit out there probably does make
Out of
sense.
A or on B.
B,
B.
well, where's, oh, A,
It's an
okay,
A also.
Yeah,
It's
The primary intent of generating income and profit.
I would
Right.
make them both.
well, I think we should be consistent.
Yeah.
We should say generate, if we say generate income in A, it should be generate income in B.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you use production of income above, so I think maybe income.
Versus revenue. And I'm still thinking taking profit out.
I think
Yeah.
take profit out of both
Objective.
of them, yes, especially if they could be.
My writing style is put a lot more stuff in than you need because it's always easier to delete than it is to try and have stuff.
Oh, you
going.
just used to be able to pay for the word.
We don't pay them much for the work. but-
Okay, good here.
we wanna go to next? Eliminate non-qual?
So we got our definitions done and we got our RTC exclusions done. So we've got A and E done off our agenda. So Amanda is indicating that maybe the 1 acre farm site thing would be the next easiest. Apparently, we're going from easy to hard.
Still have for lunch.
Didn't wait till the last stuff then. Holy moly.
That was just my suggestion. It's not something we have to do.
Well, I move we accept that suggestion and we rock and roll.
Shouldn't we start with the hard ones first? I think this one was harder than you think.
You're right.
So again, just the concept is that 1 acre on qualified ag, instead of getting an ag value, it gets a market value like all the other 1 acre sites. So currently, non-qual 1 acre site is at market value, 1 acre home site on forest land is at market value. This would just be making it consistent across the board that all 1 acre home sites under a residence are valued at market value, not given the ag value.
And
And so, and I'm confused about how the market value of that 1 acre site is not equal to the adjacent land that's been sold at market value, at its market value. So would the value of that 1 acre under a farm home site have the same market value as the land that you're producing on?
Yes, we would use our current acre models that we
Right.
build for all other
Okay.
residential property, and instead of that 1 acre home site, which for this site is valued at $2,003.
Mhm.
Kept taxed as class 3 property at the ag class rate or tax rate. That 1 acre would use our market models and say, okay, in this area, 1 acre sells for $25,000, it would be valued at the $25,000, and given the 1.35% residential tax rate instead of the 2.16%.
And what if it goes the other direction? What if the land is selling for $250 an acre in that particular location?
Then that's
Then the
what that
value
1
of
acre
that, okay.
site
all
would be.
But wait a minute, make sure you're clear on that.
right.
Not farmland. We're talking
Right.
towns. So,
Right.
so if you're, this will be DOA. I think. Well, where it might be good policy. I don't see this flying. Because every farmer in Montana is gonna freak out.
Yes.
Mhm.
And because it isn't actually, let's take my place. I got my acre 15 miles south of Winnet. The sagebrush around it's probably, it might sell for $250 an acre. The Department of Revenue is gonna say, hey, wait a minute, that is gonna be valued like a lot, like a residential lot in town. In Winnet.
Not necessarily in town.
Well, okay, a
No.
residential lot, but
But-
Winnet's probably part of the neighborhood. In that example, right?
Town is gonna have its own
Value.
model.
Okay,
Now, surrounding town, so the 5 and 10 acre parcels that are surrounding town is gonna have a different model.
okay.
And so these farms are gonna have that rural model, and so we're not looking at town, we're looking at out of town.
Out of
Right.
town,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Models are created
so
by
then
the
in a
sales
rural-
that they get
yes.
and verify.
In a rural
Yes.
model, this would be very beneficial for some of those people.
Some,
For
For the ones-
but maybe not a,
So.
Dallas.
Well, so,
okay, so- Yeah.
This
Yeah.
analysis, some analysis still
Oh,
put
great.
together to show kind
Now
of
you
what
got
this
ag value, you get
impact
$2,000
will
bucks, I
be.
know.
You can see it varies greatly. As you would expect in, your western half of the state, those market value for a home site can be pretty substantial, the benefit you get from having it classed as agricultural. You can see Gallatin. That is a pretty significant increase.
but look at the average home site. Oh, that's tax increase,
Yeah,
not
it's tax,
values.
Yeah,
Okay,
And you get.
and then let's go to Pondere County.
yeah.
Yeah.
What our houses was, right?
Yeah,
So there are some. You can see that it's pretty minimal.
Tell me what that column is, I can't see the headline, but that's your arrows on.
This one is the average tax increase to those 1 acre home site property owners.
so Daniels County is the only one that's
So
gonna go there.
everybody will have a taxi. So what was our?
That, well, not every, it's average, right?
So those people that are currently
Basic,
classified
yeah,
as qualified ag and have a home site would see a tax increase. This column here shows the mill shift. And this would be what the rest of the taxpayers would see in tax savings. Because you're increasing value,
Okay.
your mills with 15, 10, 4, 20 are gonna shift downward. So everyone else, again, it comes back to an equalization issue. And it's just kind of, again, redistributing who's paying what amount and shifting some of the burden from the people that are already at market value on their residential property. Just kind of shifting a little of that from those people onto the ag producers that are at ag value for that 1 acre site.
If I remember our conversation from the last meeting, weren't we kind of doing this to kind of mostly for Lake County or the people that are buying up the lakeside and putting 100 trees on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the true benefit to a lot of those properties of getting classified as qualified ag is to get that 1 acre site at the ag value versus the market value. You know, there is still the benefit if you have 5 acre orchard and you have your 1 acre on the lakefront house and the other 4 acres are the orchard, you're still gonna see the benefit of the classification on this 4 acres. You're just not getting that really good benefit of having 1 acre under the residence at ag value as well.
It's trying to prevent fake
Yeah, I get
farmers
that.
and ranchers from applying or doing something to get that benefit when they're not.
But you're gonna hurt the guy like, was telling Brandon earlier about the guy that's been in Gallatin County for 100 years and had a family ranch. It's gonna hurt him significantly.
Yes.
And
I
you look
just
at
was
the,
Can we
wondering,
go
There'll be
back to the
impact.
top to
Sure.
see the,
Yeah, so this is organized by average home site tax increase. And yeah, I mean, Gallatin's certainly the standout.
I just wondered what our purpose was for doing it, and I guess that was just, I get it. And it was more for those places like Lake County. if I remember right.
That's where the pushback's gonna
Yeah,
come from.
yeah.
well, when you go down the list, pushback is gonna come from, the biggest effects are from the largest populations in the state, right? When you look at, which is why I'm saying this is a tough one to sell, right? You're gonna have a whole lot of legislators
Get a lot
hearing
of phone
from the
calls.
people on that list that's showing right now, saying, hey, wait a minute, you just jacked my taxes by $1,300.
And I get why we're doing it, but like we said, if we're harming one rancher out there, to me, I've failed. And that's gonna harm several ranchers. I mean, it's gonna do some of them some good, but it's gonna harm.
Well, there's a breakover point in there depending on the size of your ranch.
Yeah.
Your house, because
Yeah.
the tax on your house will go up, the tax on the rest of the property will go down, but in Gallatin County, that will work.
So the taxes on the house itself should not change.
Right, just.
But
on the
just
side.
the land that's under that,
Right.
just the structure side.
Right, but in Gallatin County, that's $1,400 on the 1 acre under your home.
and that's an average.
Yeah.
It is gonna be higher,
Yeah.
the closer to Bozeman you get, it's gonna be lower. The further away you get. Or from not necessarily in Bozeman, but in
Big stuff.
big, yeah.
I just think you're gonna get an awful long line of people that are not digging on that.
I've told you this story before.
It's 6 figures in value.
Why they decided this, they were gonna do this exact thing.
I'm not sure that.
And Boston was a good. For the hearing, and they had to move it down to the civic center.
Right, so that's all I did.
Somewhere more, and then that process died, and they went into another thing that basically created a valuation system in the early '90s.
Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry, Bob.
The argument was that the 1 acre, you weren't taxing improvements on the well and the septic and all that. They're trying to get the value of those included in the tax. that never happened, so you just basically, instead of doing all that, you went to the high, the irrigated ground. Kind of like how Mount Paul came about, we want to generate more revenue off of this piece of property than what it's generating. How do you do that? Well, there's all kinds of ways. What can you politically do, like, that?
Well, and I'm just gonna ask you this, Bob, in this room, there is no one with more experience in this, what we're talking about doing than Bob Story, and probably in the state of Montana that I know of. What do you think, Bob? I mean, your straight up opinion on
I
it.
agree with your assessment. I mean, this is a simple concept and it's the hardest one of all of them to sell. Because of what John said, you can be able to poster child a bunch of people and say, you know, you're raising my taxes $1,000. For what? I'm not getting anything more out of it.
You know, and I've got a potato farm in the Gallatin Valley or whatever.
But-
Go ahead, Amanda. Amanda's got something. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, to some extent too, the other tax force, whatever, it's looking at a homestead exemption. And that may reduce some of these average tax increases as well.
If you're organized properly.
Right.
If you're not owned through a corporation.
Right,
Yeah.
or a family corporation or LLC, or,
And a
yeah.
bunch of these will be.
that's, yeah, and that's problematic too, because that's not
I agree.
doing what we intend.
And it will help that one part, one house, but if you have more than one.
True.
Go ahead. Sorry, John.
Is there value in proposing it anyway, even if you don't necessarily expect the greatest likelihood of success? I mean, I completely understand that this is gonna be a push. This is Sisyphus's rock, man. This is not gonna be easy, but change comes hard to a lot of people, and so maybe trying more than once might be what's required. And I'm not so sure that this is the wrong thing to do. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is the right thing to do, even if it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it just helps educate.
Yeah.
And because we have to be honest, there is a current discrepancy.
Sure, and if you put a little light on it, even if it doesn't succeed this time around, maybe
And
maybe
sometimes,
somebody else has a better, a silver bullet that actually works.
and sometimes the strategy is you do go in with more bills than you practically think are going
Yeah.
to pass.
Well, and there's other
You got
things.
guts.
Well,
She's not
I'm
afraid.
also, I'm sensitive to the idea that, somebody's gonna end up trying to defend this bill, and do you want through this?
So can I ask a dumb question on this? Would it mitigate it? If we said for these properties, half acre, quarter acre? Would that, I'm asking a dumb question probably, if you change it to a quarter acre.
Work, you're not gonna see that big of a change when it goes from 1 acre to a half acre, because again, the models are based on the concept that you're buying that property for the purpose of putting a residence on it. And if you look at sales, Gallatin County with that mindset, your half acre sales aren't that drastically different than what your acre is selling for, because most people are buying that with the intent or purpose of building a house. So you don't see that, diminishing difference in value.
Well, what about the flip side of that is the size of parcels. I mean, if we're talking about somebody putting, 100 trees on the 1 acre on the 5 acres. If the bona fide operation is bona fide operation, but you have this market thing that kicks into place for that 1 acre if it's smaller than 3 acres total or something. I don't know. I'm just same
That
idea,
1 acre-
different approach.
We'll go with Brian and then John, because I think Brian is
Okay.
first.
Well, I like that concept, it might work, but I mean, my main objective of supporting this idea, of course, was to get rid of or to try to weed out some fraudulent quote farmers unquote. And maybe there's other ways to do that besides, because this is a blanket thing that affects all farmers, not just the fraudulent ones, so, but, you know, maybe there's some other things that, for instance, just the increasing of the amount that you have to show an income could make a difference, but for cherry farmers, you know, they had a provisional 5 years. I mean, if you did away with that, because they get this freebie 5 years without doing anything, raising anything, basically. But another thing too, just like in Gallatin Valley, I mean, I've heard of stories of people, what's to prevent, you know, a number of people in Gallatin Valley from raising $1,500 worth of garlic or lavender, or, you know, you can pick your color, whatever. So, you know, how do you prevent that sort of thing from happening and not still paying your fair share of taxes? That's the big question.
It is. We'll hit John and then Amanda.
Well, my just question was, there's another working group, right, that's dealing with residential property. Is this something they've talked about, or is this something they should propose instead of us?
Not the individual acre under a house.
Not the acre under.
They're not talking about non-qualified egg. In
Yeah.
fact, they know that we're talking about that.
But I just think they're talking about residences.
They are talking about residences and they are talking about a homestead exemption. For a primary residence, and Bob probably knows more about the details of what are the parameters. Does it have to be owned by an individual to entity owned qualified?
I'm not.
I don't know what it's finally gonna look like.
It just seems like if in our mind, we're gonna harm some agricultural producers by doing this, maybe we should. Drop it entirely.
We'll I had Amanda and then Ross. Go ahead, Amanda.
I just wanted to point out on the average tax increase for Lake County, I was talking to Dylan, that's based on acres. And when you're talking front foot and depth waterfront, that increase is gonna be a lot higher. We're talking, our average increase for taxes on waterfront property is gonna be exceed Gallatin.
I bet it would, wouldn't it?
Right.
But yeah, now that you pointed out, does everybody track what Amanda just said? Okay,
These are averages.
yeah,
By the acre, when you're talking waterfront where all the orchards are, you're talking up to 6 figures on one acre breakout.
That's what brought this conversation.
Right. And then somebody said that there's somebody online that had their hand up that was unnoticed.
The chat, there's a chat.
that's been there.
That was just, okay.
So here's my take on it. Oh, sorry, Ross, and then I'll say.
So this is just clarification. We have total home site tax increase for Gallatin Valley is 1.7 million. That's how much that 1 acre increases?
No.
That's
The 1,272 home sites, when you.
That it adds
All
all
of those to
Yes.
market value, that will equate to a $1.7 million increase on those people. And everyone else would see a savings of about $18.
So it would also be a decrease of 1.7 million amongst other classifications.
That's right.
That's the average of which
And that's what that
is,
last column is showing, that median home tax savings would be the other, 20,000
Right.
homeowners would see a $18 reduction because of the.
right, so it's
Okay,
not an
but-
increase in revenue, really, it's by one class, but the others go
Right, so
down.
it's,
So it's
but I'm still looking at the 1 acre, because we're saying an average home site tax increase then in Gallatin would be about $1,400. So what is that 1 acre valued at, that the actual dollars that are taxed is $1,400?
Well, I mean, if you're talking Big Sky and you have something in, say, the Yellowstone Club that has an ag classification that's valued at $2,003, when those lots sell for $6, $7, $10 million, that's gonna be
Okay, so
a
that was my
$5,000 tax increase on
Yeah.
that person versus if you're
Right.
maybe down in Three
That's what I was
Forks,
thinking.
that might be $30,000 or $40,000 lot. That tax increase on that person is probably gonna be a couple $100, so it
Yeah.
is.
Okay, so then it's
really-
not every one of these is gonna pay for.
No,
No,
it's an
right.
average.
Yeah,
You
right.
really need to understand that's an average. It's
Right.
gonna vary
So
different.
now we're
Right.
back to. If the guy in Yellowstone Club is now paying. Whatever per acre, that's not, you're not gonna have busloads of guys from the Yellowstone Club in there hammering us. The question is, what's it gonna cost the average guy that has an acre that's affected? Is it $200? Or is it?
Maybe median would be a better measure.
Yeah.
But.
Yes, median would work better, but I don't think that this data is incredibly skewed towards the upper end. I mean, maybe in Gallatin it is, but I mean, like, if you look at Broadwater County, something like, where is the prime real estate in Broadwater County? You know, it's still an average of $300. So you're right that maybe if we're focusing on the 1,400, that's not so common, but I think, you know, I doubt there's anybody in Gallatin that's gonna see less than like a $300 tax increase or something, you know? And so you know, how many hundreds of dollars of tax increase is the point at which people get upset?
Right now, but.
I don't think it has to be $1,400. So,
what
but
are
I
they-
can try and look at.
So what are the offsets? Because on an ag operation, they have their home on their 1 acre site. And they also conduct the business of the agricultural business. And they want to be able to incorporate that in part of the ag operation, therefore getting the ag classification. So how are we going to compensate? I mean, is that through income tax that they can write it off as a business expense?
Yeah. But I think frankly, and I think Bob's gonna tell me the same thing. If we go down that second column from the left of affected taxpayers and hit total. And we don't need to even total it, but it's gonna be thousands of taxpayers, probably tens of thousands. Oh,
26.
okay, 26,000 and a half.
Mhm.
Virtually all but roughly 300. Or 5, was it Daniels was the only net negative?
Yep.
Are gonna see a tax increase.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking, and I'm thinking out loud, you guys tell me I'm crazy. That is gonna be a headline with what my boss and the legislature did. Look what they did. They raised taxes on every farmer in the state of Montana except those guys in Daniels. I mean, that'll be the thing, and there is nobody in the legislature that's probably gonna be digging that. And possibly my boss, LG, you got a better feel for that than I do. It's gonna amount to a tax increase on agriculture.
If we change the non-qualified ag, it is gonna cause an increase for those taxpayers.
This is not qual, this is every home site across, on every farm.
On this bill.
Yeah, it's more than the non-qualified, but.
Yeah. So yeah, the non-qual thing is gonna have a tax increase on some number of taxpayers.
Mhm.
This one is, I'm looking at this and I am the worst politician in the world, so somebody tell me I'm crazy. But you hit that total and you say, hey, every farm group, every ag group, every whatever, these guys, Beatty's committee just raised every one of your taxes.
Mhm.
And how do you guys respond to that at RIC, or how does the governor's office respond?
So it seems like this whole conversation came around because of the Jerry Farmer, you know, issue on Flathead. And maybe that is more of a specific targeted discussion about how do you deal with that.
Right, but my point is that it could happen anywhere where you have a, you know, giant market values. And you wanna reduce it and become a farmer with, you know, just your backyard lavender patch.
But maybe this is a good thing to bring up and educate the public and then strike down.
Right.
But at least let people know that we're looking at it this way and that there is a discrepancy.
Or at what size of parcel are they trying to play the system? And do you put a size if you're 10 acres or less, if you're 20 acres or less? Then your 1 acre gets a market value. If you're a larger operation, this doesn't impact you.
And maybe even more so than that. The size and or otherwise what would be the market value. You tie it to that, if it's, you know, you've got 1 acre parcels that sell for
$500,000. Maybe that's how you can start to rein the scope of this thing in. You just, we know that this thing is this much. How do you use that information then to make sure that you aren't getting people that are playing the system?
How many, what would that 26 drop to then? That 26,000?
Statewide affected.
So I'm just going to, I think it was John that made the comment about that this would be a good thing to bring forward, even if we don't know that it's going to go forward. This was one of the bills that was up in for the 2017 legislature. So it was brought forward by the Revenue Interim Committee at that time to the legislature as a bill to put all of the home sites at market value. Personally, having, as I said, I've done this for a long time, it would take a lot of pressure off of the department. We would not have near the people applying for agricultural status or calling our local offices and saying, what can I do to get my property classified as ag? And my answer is always, we don't tell you how to manage your property. You tell us how to do it. We'll tell you what the classification is. But we get those calls all the time. And it's because they want to get their home site in at an ag benefit value. I think it's really good even to bring it to the Revenue Interim Committee. Just as you said, you don't have a lot of people coming back that were there before, to get more people that are educated and understand the problem and see those issues.
That's always good.
The last bill, quite frankly, the Revenue Interim Committee decided to go forward with it, but it never made it to a hearing with its house tax.
Was
Didn't
that
even make it.
Hudson?
I think so. But
Because
I'm not-
I've heard accounts of how skewered they were.
Yeah. But we did, there was a lot of work, there were ag committees that came in, but it never made a hearing. But at least we had been to the Revenue Interim Committee meeting, all those inequities had been shown. And we also had worked on doing those home sites at different value or different size ranges, getting that. I don't remember what those came out or if we still have that data, but those were things that were done at that point in time.
I think the biggest impact is going to be in the smaller specialty crop orchards.
Right.
Or specialty crop
Period.
farm, period, thank you. I think they are gonna see a larger impact than what this is really showing you.
I don't know that you could technically target if you're
Exactly.
classified as a specialty crop, then you get
Exactly.
1 acre. I think that's
Is
the
ag, is
problem.
ag, is ag.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your counties with the high market values are the
Right.
ones that are going to really get hit.
Right. And that's actually what's bugging me a little bit about this, because those counties with high market values, there is actually some legitimate ag in those
Oh,
counties, you know,
absolutely.
Gallup, is a great
All of them,
example.
all of them.
And
Like-
there's high market
like-
value and that individual, of course, is living in a high market value area, but they're selling a commodity
Mhm.
into a commodity market that isn't necessarily reflective of just your real estate value, right?
Doesn't care that you actually.
Yeah. Right, his potato is worth out of Gallatin County as much as the potato is out of Treasure County, right? That's what. This just kind of gives me, and I'm having flashbacks to 2017. And
But the other
if I
side
recall,
of the
it wasn't-
story is
Yeah, it
the
wasn't.
fraudulent farmers and the
Yeah.
Big Sky example is just, you know.
Right. Right,
that-
oh, I'm sorry, LG, are you done? I didn't-
yeah. Mhm.
John, go ahead.
I mean, I like the idea of making people aware of the problem, but I don't like it coming out of our group, because I just, to me, we're here to support agriculture, and
Yes.
I think if we're sending something that we hope fails, or no one's gonna fail, we shouldn't send it.
And I'm not sure, to mirror kind of what John says, also, this isn't necessarily land classification like we were talking.
This is tax.
It's a little different. And actually, I just really am afraid to stand up and even advocate for this thing. So, kill me, along with the rest of us.
Well, I was just gonna say maybe, the idea of having it only apply to like smaller acreages. Cause I can name a number of places on the lake with 2 acres or less that are still getting ag status because they squeezed in 100 trees on less than an acre. And, you know, the market value of their home front lot is huge and they're getting ag status, but So if you did that, and I mean, if you even made it as low as 4 acres and under, you gotta pay market value for your home site. Then, there's no potato farms that are less than 4 acres, I don't think, or.
Could we do that? Could we get an analysis if it was for
Yeah,
5,
I
like,
think
what do we
so.
pay, 5 acres or less?
0 to 5 acres.
Dylan, are you
Is-
tracking this?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's gonna.
Cause that would extend
Way off
all
base,
of
guys.
your
I've
farmers
been
and
told I've been that way
ranchers.
before, so I'm not offended if you think I'm crazy. I'm just really worried about bringing this out.
Yeah, yeah.
It scares me.
Well, why don't we take another run like a 5 acre parcel?
Should we
or
look at
less?
5, 10, 20?
If you can do
Just to
that,
see and look at what those numbers
sure.
would be.
And I think that would be useful. I just don't want to create another category of acres.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right,
20
Bob.
We got 20 to 160, we got above, you know, we might have 640 before we get down here. I don't know if I want 5 and 10.
Yeah, and I'm sure we
Well,
don't.
I guess,
Right.
you know, yeah, cause the bottom line is, it's a $9 million.
Shift.
Is that worth the pain? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Right.
That's not a big number of revenue.
Erwin Rummel once said, never fight a battle that you get nothing out of winning.
It's a good.
Ah,
I mean, some people pay that for just their lot
Yeah,
in one, I mean, 9 million statewide is not a big number
Right.
statewide.
Right, and that is statewide, yeah,
Bob, are you
that's,
looking at the number of CPAs that are gonna come in and be against it
yeah,
on
For-
top of the busloads of?
yeah, for a net of $7.72 savings.
yeah, is it worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
To me, that just doesn't feel like a hill I feel like dying
Mhm.
on. But again, I'm just one,
Well, why don't we just at least take a look at the 5 acre or whatever.
that makes sense.
We
We'll
can
just
give
take
you
a look at it.
like 3 different scenarios and then you guys can decide what you think.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Dylan.
It's all right.
He's kind of the hero.
He
of
loves
this
it.
thing.
I
He
guess
loved
something to
it.
think about too is. Well, so, no, never mind, actually. I was just thinking about the interplay of if we eliminate non-qual. Does that affect things?
Yeah.
But if, it sounds like we're mostly only talking about in this scenario, putting this requirement on people that already wouldn't be encompassed in non-qual. The only way they'd be in ag is if they apply, so that shouldn't be.
Is that what your analysis shows, or these 29,000 people all qualified?
This is all qualified, because again, if you're non-qual, you're already paying market value on your home site. So this was specifically looking at only qualified properties, because they're the only ones that would be affected by the law.
I mean, it's really you have to look at it from the frame of the equity. And
Yeah.
if you're got a 20-acre parcel right outside of Bozeman city limits, and everyone around you has a half acre, and their land is valued at $300,000, and then they look at their neighbor that has the 20 acres and their land's only valued at $5,000. That's, I mean, that's the questions we get, the complaints we hear, and why you look at it from the equity standpoint, does that, in longer term, probably, if you're worried about maintaining the production value, that's where the sticking point is eventually gonna start coming from, is you got 50,000 people that live in Missoula or Bozeman that have a half acre that's valued at for $300,000 to $400,000, and you have the surrounding qualified ag that is valued at 5,000. Eventually, that voice potentially is gonna grow louder and louder and say, hey, what's going on here? How can this guy that has a piece of property that's worth $10 million valued at 5,000, when I'm valued at 300,000, I only have a half acre.
That's right, yeah.
So it's the equity is the piece
That's why we're looking at it.
that you have to settle, not
I think it'll be really interesting to see how the numbers change. If you reduce that number, the 29,711 affected parcels by shrinking the size a lot. If you reduce that number by, say 90%, whatever, I don't know what it would be. But you reduce the 9 million number by a much
Would
smaller
only
amount.
become, maybe
If that
come
makes
down to
sense.
8 million.
Anyway, all of a sudden, it does show that you're capturing what you really want to capture.
Yeah.
Good point,
Exactly.
good point,
Who you really want.
good point, John. Yeah.
And I think you also want to be careful that in an example like Gallatin County, you're not forcing somebody out of ag and into subdividing.
Mhm.
Because the
Exactly.
value of the property is such that you can't sustain it with it.
And that's happening already. I mean,
Yeah.
There are gonna be natural pressures, I think, but if somebody wants to continue to be an ag producer, they shouldn't be forced.
I always wonder about some of those guys. You drive through the outskirts of Bozeman, there's like a pivot inside town. This guy can turn this to a suburb and move to Aruba.
Yeah.
Could be a conservation easement on it.
It could be, but they're really weird, right?
In perpetuity.
Okay.
So,
I like that plan.
yeah, I think Don did it. I think what you raised makes a lot of sense, right? If you can, if really what we're trying to address is not the 1 acre home site in Treasure County, but the quarter acre in Lake County or Gallatin. Sure.
Dylan, your figures did exactly what they needed to do.
Mhm.
They
I kinda
showed
thought
us
they
the
would.
possibilities and we want more.
Yeah. This guy has never thanked enough.
That's true.
I try, but I don't think I can thank him enough for what
We're
he does.
trying, we're trying.
That's what they pay me for.
Actually, this was a hobby.
I think the other thing you could do is run the dispersion graph on them and you know how many of them are on the top.
Oh.
Yeah.
Got that, Dylan?
I saw that thought balloon over his head, Bob, but it was empty.
You could kill hundreds of trees with that strategy.
Yeah, true.
And you killed hundreds of bills with that strategy, I know you. So should we take a break or should we continue with another bill before we have lunch?
Let's grab lunch,
Okay,
because neither one is going to be a short discussion,
Okay.
so let's grab lunch.
if everybody's in favor?